the Ministry of Truth. There's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start with the Hamas, Israel, Gaza, blah, blah, blah thing that happened yesterday. The big deal is that Steve McKinnon, who is leader of the government, changed the NDP's submission. They changed what it was in order to get it passed. Weird, right? Brian Lilly is starting us off today. He says, this man has caused utter chaos in Parliament. I've been covering the House of Commons on and off for 20 years. I've never seen such chaos. The amendments from the Liberals completely rewrite the NDP motion. This is a violation of parliamentary privilege for MPs. You can't do that. You can't do that. Clark says, procedural effery in the House of Commons, effery, that's not really a word. In the House of Commons, the government House leader introduces material changes to the NDP motion on Gaza at the conclusion of debate, and only in English. MPs Housefather and Mendicino rip into their caucus colleague. This is a mess. It's a mess. Oh, it's a mess. It's a huge mess. Here's National Post reporting. John Ivison says Liberals dodge a Palestinian bullet, but the NDP's bill is yet to come. We will doubtless find out the quid for this particular quo in the next budget, for quid pro quo, right? Like, you do this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and whatever the NDP is agreeing to will pop up in the next budget. The vote on the NDP motion, says the National Post, to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state gave every indication that the House of Commons is now governed by its nursery. The debate was highly charged all day Monday, with a number of Liberals joining NDP Bloc, Quebecois, and Green MPs to speak in support of the motion. So a uniparty establishing itself very clearly. It began to look like the vote would be a close-run thing for a government whose foreign minister, Melanie Joly, said that Canada couldn't change foreign policy based on an opposition party motion, which is true. And realistically, Canada, I know that our government is going to find this hard to believe and hard to stomach and take in, but please listen close. Canada is not in charge of Israel or Palestine. Do you understand? Stop sending money there. Or Ukraine, stop sending money there. We are not in charge of these countries. We have no say. No say. Canada could have a vote every single day for a ceasefire. And do you know what that would mean in Gaza or in Israel? It would mean bubkiss, right? It would mean nothing. It would mean absolutely nothing. It's meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. These people are wasting our time. Anybody who talks about a foreign country, other than the foreign minister, maybe, but anybody who's talking on the House floor about protecting the borders of a foreign country or protecting the democracy of a foreign country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, should be expelled to that country. See you later. Have fun. I mean, I'm maybe being a little hyperbolic here, but if you're not interested in governing Canada, thank you, leave. Resign your post and move over there, and you tell them how great you think they are, and you can govern them better than they can govern themselves. Because Canada doesn't have a say in what Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, or Russia do. We don't. And if we want to have a say, we better get a much better military than the one we've got, because you need to go occupy somewhere to make them do something that you want them to do. Are we willing to do that? No, then we better shut up and maybe start trying to mediate meetings again like we used to, right? Like, this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Back to the article. It seemed that the New Democrats, who have been propping up the Liberals for months, were about to deliver a potential coup de grace by exposing ruptures in the government caucus. So even with a whipped vote, they weren't going to vote for this. Mutiny in the Liberal ranks has been brewing ever since Prime Minister Trudeau expressed his support for Israel's right to defend itself. He might have whipped the vote to the motion to avoid embarrassment, but it appears he no longer has the authority within his caucus to enforce it. Humiliation loomed until the 11th hour after the debate in the chamber had closed. The Liberal House leader, Steve McKinnon, stood to put forward a series of amendments. The most consequential was a proposal to replace the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state with language more in line with current policy, that Canada would work with international partners to pursue the goal of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, including towards the establishment of a state of Palestine as part of a two-state solution. So Jagmeet Singh was trying to say, we're recognizing Palestine as a state, and that would make news. Canada recognizing Palestine as a state would make news, even in a non-binding way. But this watered it down so that it could pass in the House of Commons. So the Liberals wanted this to pass as much as the NDP wanted this to pass, right? Here's the House of Commons in the chamber. House of Commons chamber says vote results to the NDP opposition motion, Canada's action to promote peace in the Middle East. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. was adopted, 204 to 117. So Liberal and NDP, right? That's their majority government there. Michael says the NDP caucus were all wearing kafias, whatever they're called. I'm not sure what they're called. And names aren't my thing for the vote. So there you go. It's like when the Vuvuzela thing was the thing, and I couldn't say Vuvuzela for a while. CVC Watcher said, he really can't be this much of a fool. Jagmeet Singh is asked about Hamas being the government in government by Marky Walsh. He doesn't answer the question, which is typical. This government doesn't answer the question. They say words. They don't actually say anything that has meaning. They just say words, right? Meaningless words. Here we go.
On your motion, it does not condemn Hamas. It does not call on Hamas to surrender. And it leaves open the possibility that when you're declaring Palestinian statehood, you're envisioning Hamas as the government. You're leaving that open as to the future of Hamas. Why are you not declarative in your stance on Hamas in this statement?
Well, we've been very clear on this, and we'll repeat it very clearly so that everyone knows. We condemn Hamas unequivocally as a terrorist organization. We condemn the attack as a terrorist attack on October 7th. And so we want that to be very clear. We've always maintained that position. And when we're recognizing Palestinian statehood, we're saying that we've always maintained a position of a two-state solution. You can't have a two-state solution without recognizing that there's two states. So this is just about moving forward for peace and justice. We will always maintain our position that both Israelis and Palestinians have the right to self-determination and the right to safety and security.
Balfour Declaration, 1917. 1917, England invaded Palestine. The area is now called Palestine, and took control, blah, 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 blah. They stayed until 1947-48. 1947-48 was the bombing campaign by Jinnah to create Pakistan as well, just to keep that in mind, timelines and all that, right? So in 1948, the Balfour Declaration happened, and the United Nations, at the behest of Britain, who had pulled out of what is now Palestine, I guess, Israel, Palestine, that whole area, they pulled out, and the United Nations created Israel, the state, at the behest of England, I guess, but the United Nations didn't control the land. England was pulling out of the land, so they're going to put these proxy people in and create a state there. How does the United Nations have the authority to do that? I don't think they do. In land they don't control because they didn't. For people they don't represent because they don't. So I have a hard time with that. I'd love to read the comprehensive, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, but not like the comprehensive one that's pieced together by historians and people who said, like, this is actually how it happened. Like the justification for all of this from the official sources, right? The state of Israel's creation from Israel's point of view, and so on and so forth. And I think that it's really funny. Like, if you reduce all of this down to a land conflict where England invaded in 1917. And then, okay, maybe you want to go back further, back to biblical times. There's all sorts of arguments back and forth. But like, do we use biblical references in the modern era all that often for land claims? Right? Like, the people who controlled that peninsula prior to England invading, I don't think it was a state of Jewish people. Like, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But people say go far enough back, and it was, but is that a justification for all of the conflict now, right? Can we not have a conversation about the modern laws, et cetera, or am I off on a red herring here? I may be, right? There's a whole peace accord in the 1960s as well, but here's the comparison that I'm trying to make. And let me know if I'm off, because I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm trying to look at this as objectively as I can. Also, keeping in mind that anything I say means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Nobody's going to change anything. And that's part of it as well. We have to move forward without this being resolved, but it should be part of the conversation, right? Like, we should all be able to say, well, this happened, and that's kind of F. That's kind of weird, right? But now here we are, and what are we going to do now, right? And so these guys are saying two-state solution, but they're not willing to engage in how the two-state situation even was brought about in the first place. So here it is. These people were living in a house. Somebody else moved into the house, but those people didn't want them to move into the house, right? They replaced other people who were living upstairs, but, so on and so forth. Do they have a right to do that? And if they have a right to do that, is proposing a two-state solution in the House where the new people, the people who are displacing the other people, are continually being aggressive and so on and so forth, is this a tolerable situation? In your head, is that House split into two already? Or was it a single dwelling, like upstairs was the master bedroom and a couple of kids' bedrooms? Or was upstairs like one apartment and downstairs another apartment? In my head, it started out as upstairs had master bedrooms. And then I thought, okay, well, the Brits were there. So maybe upstairs had already been converted into like a quasi apartment, right? But in my head, it switched into two apartments. Is that where we're at? Is it two apartments now? If it's two apartments, should the world get on board with that? Can a country just do that? And what if the United Nations decides that Khalistan is a state, they deserve statehood, and Canada's got a lot of land anyway, and we'll just put it in northern Saskatchewan anyway. Who cares? Who cares, right? Is that okay? Can they do that? Can they bestow land on people, statehood on a people in a place they don't control on behalf of people they don't represent? Can they do that? Is that analogous, or is that way out there? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think, because I think that one, that should be part of the conversation. Like, what's happened was not great, right? Like all of this, not good. And we've evolved past that. We're beyond that now. We can solve our problems with diplomacy, right? Bullshit. But if we can agree, and then we can move on, right? Okay, we agree that this happened and so on and so forth. But if we're saying like, we're all peaceful here, well, that's not entirely true, right? Like, it's not entirely true. Talking about how politicians shouldn't be doing full-throated, I'm going to stand up for Ukraine until the end. Here's another one. I'm going to stand up for Palestine, Gaza, whatever, till the end. Here we go. This is an NDP. Is this destroying the NDP's re-election chance, or is this really popular in Canada? I don't think this looks good on the NDP, because we live in Canada, not Palestine. And anything that we do, money we raise, et cetera, it's not going to solve that problem. We can't solve that problem. We can solve problems here. We can't solve problems there. And we're focused exclusively on problems we can't solve. And that's a problem. Here's this.
And I'm going to be coming back every single day into this House of Commons and demanding the rights for Palestinian people. And I'm going to be coming back every single day into this House of Commons and demanding the rights for Palestinian.
That was a shorter clip than I thought. I was typing out the title of today's show, possibly. But unbelievable. She is coming back every day fighting for the Palestinian people. Really? Because you work for Canadian people. Canadians. Here in Canada. Have you seen the potholes? Apparently that's the electric vehicle's fault, by the way. David Jacobs is responding to Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh says, breaking, the vote is in, and we have forced the Liberals to stop selling arms to the Israeli government, support the ICC. I mean, I think that's fine. Like, I don't think we should be funding foreign wars. I don't think we should be selling weapons. If we can make our own weapons, but I don't think we should be selling weapons, particularly to people who are using them to wage war, because that's akin to supporting a war, right? Support the ICC and the ICJ, place sanctions on extremist settlers. What does that even mean? Extremist settlers. Am I an extremist settler? Holy smoke, Jagmeet Singh, I don't trust you at all. He gets community noted for this as well. Every single Conservative MP and some Liberals tried to block it. They failed. The motion was materially changed, and you're celebrating like it wasn't. That's funny. Canada Libra says NDP oddly silent on the Sudan war. That's 45,000 plus casualties and 8 million people displaced. Why the hyper focus on Israel? It's baked into the DNA of the party. CTV News is reporting September 15th, 2021. 2 federal NDP candidates resign after anti-Semitic social media posts spark backlash. So they're constantly virtue signaling about being in favor of helping foreign countries constantly. It's not new. Laurie Goldstein has But I Birth Canada. They're outraged by the House of Commons decision Monday to adopt an unprecedented and appalling anti-Israeli proposal introduced by the New Democrats, the NDP. The non-binding motion is a worrisome sign that anti-Israel demonization is becoming normalized in Canada. There's a legitimate risk that the motion will only further fuel the incitement that is already responsible for fermenting record levels of anti-Semitism within our country. I think all of this language is something that we could do without. I think that all of this hyper-focus on Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, et cetera, misses the forest from the trees, and we're getting ourselves tied up in knots over things that we shouldn't be. We should focus on tangible problems to solve in Canada and nothing else. Oh, racism? I mean, we can't legislate you can't legislate away something that's in somebody's heart. Okay, you just can't. You can't say that's illegal to feel that now, Mark. You can't feel that anymore, right? Your love for chocolate cereal is illegal by the stroke of this pen. I'm sorry, buddy. That fire is a fire you can't douse. You can't put that out, right? It's going to be there forever. You can tell me that it's bad for me. I remember I remember somebody telling me that smoking was bad for me, and I was standing out in front or something like that, out front of a bar, and somebody said, that's bad for me. And I was like, oh, you don't say. Like, oh my gosh, shocker. Thanks for letting me know. Great argument. Well done. It's not going to work. It's not going to work, right? You can't legislate it away. I will love it forever. Duncan says, whatever you think of Marco Mendicino, I think Marco Mendicino is allergic to the truth. Marco Mendicino is a liar who cannot be trusted by anybody, and that's proven out because he has said so many lies in the House of Commons when he should be telling the truth. That's standard, right? If you're standing on the floor of the House of Commons, people expect you to tell the truth, I think. Marco Mendicino takes that as an opportunity to do what he does best, which is lie. And Anthony Housefather, the guy who was stealing campaign material from his competitors during the 2019 election. What a snake. So these guys stand up and say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. I don't actually care what they say, but Duncan D says, well, whatever you think of them. For them to stand in the House to protect and preserve their privileges as member of Parliament against an attempt by their own House leader to usurp those rights is a demonstration of their courage and honor. Now, technically, the House leader shouldn't have changed the amendment. He's breaking the rules. I haven't actually listened to this, so we'll listen to this. Marco, you know what? I can't. I don't care what Marco Mendicino says because the guy can't tell the truth. So he's calling out the bad procedure, but I don't care because Marco Mendicino is terrible. Holly Doan says, Cabinet will not pick sides in Israel's war with Hamas, says Foreign Affairs Minister Mel Joly. Commons passed a vote 204 to 117, a new Democrat motion to end the conflict. We'll vote again tomorrow. We'll vote to end the conflict in Russia tomorrow. No, we won't. We're sending too much money to Ukraine to end that war right now. So the government really wants that war to continue, I guess, which is a very, very strange thing. Very strange thing indeed. CTV News reports more families will be allowed to apply to come to Canada from Gaza, says the immigration minister. This is March 18th. This is yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. More families from Gaza. Can you wait? Woo. It's not like people are living in tent cities that keep going up in flames. Oh, sorry. CTV Kitchener is reporting no injuries reported after fire breaks out at Guelph encampment. This is reported yesterday. Actually, this is reported this morning at 6:50 a.m. Guelph police said nobody was hurt. Oh, phew. I mean, how many Gazans lived in the encampment in Guelph, right? That they're living outside in March in 2024. Did you expect that in the early 2000s? If somebody had come back from the future and said, Guelph's going to have tent encampments in 2024, be warned, right? And then promptly died. Nobody would believe them. But here we are. Emergency crews were called to the scene near Hanlon Expressway and Silver Creek Parkway around 9:30 p.m. Officials say a temporary structure made from wooden pallets was on fire, and firefighters were able to get the flames under control. Oh, good. Everybody was able to go right back inside then, eh? Damage was limited to the encampment. The cause is believed to be an accidental due to unattended campfires. Let's bring as many Gazans as we can here because Canada is a safe place to live for people. As long as, you don't set a fire in the tent that is the only place of housing that you could afford or find because there isn't anywhere to live. Yeah, we're helping. Idiots. Shadow of Ezra says, Michigan attorney. Let's move on. We're talking about election things here. Stephanie Lambert is talking about Dominion, and we're going to come back to money. I wanted to talk about the tent encampments, and this is kind of just connected to electioneering and fraud and things like that. She's saying, I gave evidence to law enforcement that the discovery file from Dominion contained evidence of numerous crimes. The Constitution does not permit secret Serbians to run our elections. Local clerks are to run our elections, and transparency is prevented by vendors. Now, what if the local clerks come from Gaza? Is that okay? Can anybody who's here locally run the elections? Because, I'm sure that the powers that be can figure that one out too. So Shadows of Ezra says, Michigan attorney Stephanie Lambert was arrested by U.S. Marshals after a hearing over possible sanctions against her for disseminating confidential emails from Dominion voting systems regarding the 2020 federal election in the United States. So that election was definitely stolen. Why would they steal elections? Because if you have control of the government, you can steal a lot of money and have it look like foreign aid or something to that effect, right? And it gives you a lot of power. And then you could even, censor people for bullshit reasons to make sure that you don't lose your power, right? Yeah, and that's what's going on. So here is what's going on with regards to the money that is just disappearing, poof, gone, like sand through your fingertips. These are the days of our lives. The Trudeau government gave $150 million of our tax dollars to promote gender-inclusive governance in these countries. $80 million to the Taliban. I mean Afghanistan. 14.1 million to Haiti. So I've got something to say about Haiti later in the show today too. Barbecue's got $14.1 million. He's blockading the airports. Do you know why he's blockading the airports? To make sure that the president in exile doesn't come back with Kenyan death squads. I'm not even kidding. I wish I was kidding. I wish I was kidding. But this is what happens when the WHO New World Order takes over. Canada's military might, along with Kenya's military might, I think it's Kenya. Maybe I could be conflating the country, but I think it's an African country. Along with Kenya's military might, let's go with it, are being turned on Haiti, who just wants self-governance. And it looks like Barbecue to be the president. And Barbecue is like consolidating the gangs behind him to prevent the return of the president and these death squads. It's crazy, but Canada's giving $14 million to make sure that Barbecue gets put down and this uprising doesn't continue, because that's not rule of law, right? That's not democracy. That's not our new world order, would say Trudeau, right? So you have to put that down. They don't want people to self-govern. Haiti is trying desperately right now. That's what I think is going on. I could be wrong. We'll get to that close to the end of the show. Ukraine, 14.8 million. That's it, I'm sure. Oh, this is just for gender care. Gender care. You're in a war-torn country, and you may have had your penis blown off. The question is not, how do you fix this? The question is, you need womanhood classes, right? Like, here you go. Now you're a woman. Nigeria says Nigeria got 15.7 million. Niger just kicked out the U.S. and France, right? So Nigeria's got 15.7 million for this gender inclusive governance, and Iraq got 20 million. Iraq got 20 million. Yes. There's a lot of Iraqis who are questioning their sexuality in Iraq. Holly Doan says federal employees typically answer to 7 levels of management. That's office space times 5 more people, plus 5 more people. That's crazy. That's crazy. Can you imagine? You'd never get anything done. Federal employees typically answer to 7 levels of management, according to these guys, according to the parliamentary budget officer. There's room to reduce, says Yves Giroux, who earlier calculated the annual payroll at a record $67 billion. Wow, $67 billion. I'm sure it's well spent. I mean, not as well spent as that $80 million we sent to Afghanistan for gender inclusive governance. Dan says, breaking news, Trudeau's radical environment minister charged taxpayers $1.3 million for the Liberal government's high carbon trip to Dubai. Included was an $1,800 a night hotel room, but guess what? All the recipients all the receipts haven't been received yet. Stay tuned. So $1,800 a night. I've been on vacations that cost less for 2 people. $1,800 a night, and they were like pretty okay vacations. I mean, the food could have been better, but they were pretty okay. Holly Doan says, unnamed Canadian delegate at the last United Nations climate conference in Dubai booked an $1,822 a night Dubai hotel suite. I mean, that'd probably be pretty nice, man. Zuby's probably stayed in one that cost that much. Wall Street Silver says, why can't I afford to fill my gas tank? Well, our government is jet setting around the world, right? And this guy's in the States, but it's the same in Canada right now. He's saying, why can't I afford to fill my gas tank? Why can't I buy groceries? Here we go. He's complaining about how he can't afford anything, but Stephen Gelbo is in an $1,800 a night suite. Give me a break.
Why can't I afford to fill my gas tank? Why can't I buy groceries anymore? Why can't I pay my rent? Why is it my parents could own a home? Why is it my grandparents could own a home, have 5 kids, 2 cars, and the wife stays at home? And I'm married. I have an advanced degree. My wife has an advanced degree, and I can't even afford rent with our combined income. What the hell is going on? They were blue collar union people back in the day. I always go back to The Simpsons. It's the most prescient show of all time. The real mindfuck of The Simpsons is that was a show started, I think it was 1988. Homer Simpson is an uneducated blue collar worker, and he owns a home with 4 bedrooms, 2 cars. His wife stays at home, and he can afford 3 kids. Think about that. That's the real mind of that show. And that was commonplace in 1988. We all just, nobody looked at that like, what the heck is going on? And then you look at today, can you have that kind of lifestyle on a blue collar salary? No. That's inflation. As for the real rate of inflation, they rigged the numbers. They say it's 5%, but let's cut oil out of that. Let's cut meat and poultry out of that. Let's let's take all the things you actually need in life. My brother lives in Gillette, Wyoming. He does a lot of real estate transactions. We would see trailers and modular homes go for $50,000, $75,000. Those same properties in Gillette are selling for $180,000 5 years later from $50,000. And they tell me the inflation rate's only 5%. It's not a real number.
So this is on purpose. And I was gonna break in when he said, in 1988, Homer Simpson had 4 bedrooms, 2 cars, and 3 kids. And it is such that in 1988, we started being told that having kids in 1988, around the 1990s, 1980s, late 80s, and early 90s, we started getting told how terrible having kids was, how awful kids were. And it's continued now. Like, people who are adults, grown adults, 40-year-old people who childless are very anti-kid. They don't want kids. They're not interested in kids. They do not want their lifestyle cramped by a child, even though, I mean, that's what we're designed to do. But they're not interested. And it's not just economic, right? Like, it's a good thing they're not interested, because economically it would be very difficult for them to engage in that. Although you make it work, right? Like, you just do make it work. But it's one of those things where we have a society that has internalized this idea of, I don't want kids, and the monetary excuse has presented itself, right? And so you think you're making a pragmatic, intelligent decision. Global warming, climate change, inflation, and the fact that I can't afford a house. Well, I mean, obviously I don't need kids. I can't bring a kid into this hellscape, right? But I mean, the reality is very different. You can find situations where it all works. But the governments and powers that be that are in control of our inflationary lies, as he just illustrated, and in control of the media, will use every trick in the book to get you to do what they want you to do. It's a nudge. And even though your body's telling you these are the things that are right, or whatever, right? Like, you may think to yourself, I'd like to have kids one day, but then, well, climate change and this and that, monetarily, blah, 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 can't afford a house. You convince yourself it's the wrong move, right? And like, that's a successful propaganda campaign on multiple levels. See? Okay, Holly Doan says, customers are getting more for less. Tony Stafflery at Rogers says, MPs on Commons Industry Committee ridiculed CEO testimony. And here's part of the not part of the testimony. Brian Mass is talking about telecom CEOs. Jagmeet Singh is responding to him. He says, Canadians pay among the highest or the most expensive cell phone and internet bills in the world. 3 companies basically control the entire market. Liberals and conservatives have let corporate greed get out of control. Today, we've summoned the CEO. We have to get their greed under control to get prices down. Yeah, it's definitely their greed and not the monopolized market that's doing it. Yeah, they're definitely greedy. I mean, I'm sure they like to have a monopolized market. If I could have a monopolized market, oh, that would be so good. I would like to be the guy who sells toilet paper to, like, the Hilton, like toilet paper to hotels or prisons, or meat or bread or buns or something like that to, or fries, potatoes to McDonald's, buddy. Now you're rolling in money and you're just like, this is great, right? Because they're not going to stop selling fries. If McDonald's goes down, probably things are worse than you can imagine. And good thing that you've got all those potatoes, right? I mean, and toilet paper, right? Those are the best businesses to be in if you're not online. Elon Musk says, I just like to be behind the background, behind the scenes. I don't want to be the face of it because, see what happens when you're the face of something. Elon Musk, let's talk about censorship. Elon Musk says, Trudeau is trying to crush free speech in Canada. Shameful. He is shameful. Shameful guy. Glenn Greenwald says, the Canadian government, armed with one of the world's most repressive online censorship schemes, announces that all online streaming services that offer podcasts must formally register with the government to permit regulatory controls. It's very interesting because they don't understand the industry that they're regulating. Podcasts, and they're trying to cast a net that's big enough to catch everything, but it's unconstitutional what they're proposing. But podcasts, I mean, like, if you look at my show is distributed in a multitude of ways. One of the ways is through a podcast medium, and that's governed by Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and a couple of others. But other distribution means are like locals. That's not a podcast. Streamable. That's not a podcast. There are all sorts of different. Rumble's not a podcast. That's a video sharing website. It's not a podcast. So there's all sorts of different things, and these people just don't understand what they're trying to regulate. So it's not funny to me because they're deadly serious about the outcome they want. They just don't understand how to get the language to say what they want because they don't understand their industry. And the people who do understand the industry is probably put Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful